Hi, my name is Rick Howe. I'm a TV guy, and this show is called Talk Back to Television. It's about the business of television, how we make the programs, how we distribute the programs, and mostly how we pay for the programs. Because if we can't pay for the shows, there's nothing to watch. Stay tuned. Hi, this is Talk Back to Television. I'm here with one of my favorite guests, Mr. Patrick Donohue. Patrick, how are you?
Hey, Rick, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And as Patrick and I were discussing, there are literally two kinds of people in the world. There are car people and there are everybody else. and Patrick and I are both car people, as you will see in a minute. But before we start, Patrick has engaged in some artificial intelligence creativity, which brought this subject to mind. But I do have a story to tell first. And that is, we all know that Henry Ford, in his jealousy against Enzo Ferrari, created a fabulous vehicle, the Ford GT, which beat Ferrari in Le Mans for a couple of years, I think 64, 65, 66, maybe, I don't know what, and a great movie, Ford versus Ferrari. What we don't know is that his son Edsel was jealous of David Brown, the owner of Aston Martin. And Edsel Ford created this vehicle to compete with Aston Martin. Now, that
There it is.
a strange, I'm going to pan myself out of the picture so you can see that. That is a cross between an Aston Martin DB5 and a Ford Edsel. Or was it something that Patrick Donohue created with artificial intelligence? Patrick, which was it?
That's a great evaluation of what this is, because I wouldn't have thought of it, but it totally captures the clunky aesthetic of the Edsel with the smooth sex appeal of the DB5. So it was a perfect analysis.
So how did you create this, and why did you create this?
Well, it's interesting. If you can take credit, I guess you can take credit for making AI art. The backstory, and we'll show some of the other images, and you and I are car fanatics, and I've been obsessed with the Aston Martin DB5 since I was a kid, since I saw Goldfinger with Sean Connery, probably when I was 10 years old. I've had scale models of the Aston Martin on my desk for my entire life. There she is.
There she is.
Beautiful car, just spectacular car, and as you know, really good performance car too.
For its time.
For its time. Yes, for a 1964 car, which would be, 60 years old now.
A whopping 264 horsepower, but it was a big deal back then.
I would take one today. If you have an extra one in the garage, I'll be right down to pick it up.
Do you have a spare $2 million?
I was going to say they go for a pretty penny, especially if it's an actual James Bond car. I do lots and lots of AI art. I do it professionally in the work we do at Next Media Partners. We do a lot of concept designs and ideation, and it's a really great tool for that, although frustrating at times. But I also just do it for fun. And as people may know, there are lots and lots of these engines. You've probably heard of Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or DALL-E, which are the three big ones, but there's 50, 100 of them.
Right.
And I'm always fascinated by how similarly they respond and how differently they respond. And so I wanted to do a test with this car because I know this car in my sleep. I dream about this car, as some of you probably do too.
Patrick, now that's a little creepy.
I'll take it. So I thought I'm going to write what's called a prompt. And if your viewers don't know how this works in AI, you write text and there's a text string. And in this case, I described, a 1964 Aston Martin DB5 racing on a country road. I specified that it would be photographed with a Leica M, which is sort of a period camera from that time frame, and make it look like advertising art from the 1960s. And so I ran that same exact prompt against, 10 or 12 of these engines. And I was fascinated at how great some of them were and some not so.
Well, let's bring one up. Hold on a second. I think this is, from my perspective, one of the better ones.
Ooh, yeah, I love that one. That's Midjourney.
Okay, I mean, that one kind of nails it. It's got the perspective, it's got the lighting.
Notice the raindrops on the body panels.
I did see that. I'm not sure if our viewers can see that, but
spectacular.
Okay. Why a Leica camera? Were you figuring about the way it would focus and capture light? I mean, that's
It's interesting, right? And again, this is after probably 18 months of doing interactive AI art.
yeah.
These models are really brilliant. And if you specify things like a specific lens or an f-stop or a camera or a film stock, it actually will make the image look differently. So if you're a camera nerd, if you're shooting with a, say, 100mm lens with a 2.8 f-stop, you're going to have shallow depth of field. That's going to affect the image.
Okay.
And the color will be different if it's Kodachrome versus Ektachrome. And so remarkably, these are ways in which we can kind of shape the way the images come out.
But we assume that the program knows the difference, because
Yes.
you could end up with something that looks like that.
Well, this is fascinating, and you're absolutely right. And this actually gets to the technology for the tech people. So this was created in Firefly, and this Firefly is a generative AI image creation tool that Adobe has created. And it actually speaks to a really interesting sort of philosophical and legal challenge that this world is facing, which is, as you know, and as your viewers may know, the way generative AI images generators work is that they have what's called training data. So they go out and consume lots and lots of images, and then they sort of like a human, right? You look
Yep.
at things, you assimilate them, and then you can make new things. And so obviously that creates some interesting ethical and legal issues around, are you stealing other people's IP? Are you copying their technique? So I know it's a long-winded answer, but the interesting thing about Adobe is Adobe's customers are artists, right? So they're really careful not to piss off artists because that's their customers.
Okay.
And so their training data is actually different. They only train their model based on images that they have rights to as part of their stock footage. So my guess, and maybe someone listening to this will be on Adobe and they'll tell me, I'm wrong, but my guess is Adobe doesn't have a DB5 in their training data and therefore has no idea what to do with this prompt.
Isn't that wild?
Isn't that weird? Because
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of not a great car anyway, but it's definitely not a DB5
All
or
right.
any
So
Aston Martin.
let me go look at another one now. This is a beauty.
Beautiful.
And although the headlights are a little wrong, the
Mm-hmm.
angles are a little wrong. Let me back up a little bit. I mean,
Yep.
it's close, but it's not exactly there. And we've only got a couple of minutes. How can AI be close but not exactly there? I mean, I can understand they don't have an image of a DB5, so they can't do it, right?
Right.
How can they be this close and miss?
It's a good question. I mean, the way, sort of these systems work is they'll look at as many pictures as they can and they'll make their best guess. And so there's a couple others where I think it's a little too wide.
Yep.
And I think it's probably just the nature of two things, the algorithm and also just the training data. I've used Midjourney since it started. I run a prompt that I ran a year ago, and it's dramatically different. So the
I get that,
technology is
because
truly
Midjourney has
changing.
learned more than it knew a year ago.
Right. So they're updating their algorithms, they're updating their training data. So I'll literally take an image a year ago, I'll copy the prompt and paste it and render it, and I'm like, oh my God, night and day.
Okay, so wait a minute. If you were to do that and then do it again an hour later, there would be changes, wouldn't there?
Yeah, sure. Because
It might be subtle.
it's evolving. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
That
fascinating.
redefines what creativity is, because we think of creativity, I made it, it's here, I got it, it's always there. It's always exactly as I did it.
Yes.
I'm moving the microphone out of the way.
It's fascinating from a creative standpoint for a couple of reasons. I wrote a piece on the Next Media blog about trying to recreate kind of a standard art direction process that I did on one of my games, but with a traditional artist, right? Get on the phone, talk about it, make concepts, whatever. And then I thought, well, maybe I could replace that process with Midjourney or one of these others. And it was great in some ways, but what it was terrible at is when I wanted to give it specific instructions. Put the spaceman next to the rocket ship.
Right.
100 prompts didn't work. And a perfect example on this one is you'll notice every one of these images, there's no driver in the car.
No, that's because you didn't specify a driver.
Apparently so, but prepping to talk to you today, I thought, let me make a rendering and put a guy in it. And I must have tried 15 times and I couldn't get it to put a guy driving the car. And that's where AI gets really frustrating. And it's really hard if a client says, gee, can you make this bigger or smaller? You're like, well, no, I really can't.
All right. All right.
So
well, guess what? We are out of time, but we got a lot more to talk about, including whether or not we can ever teach AI how to drive a car.
I hope so. Tesla's betting on it.
A little strange. All right, Patrick Donohue, thank you for your time, bud.
This is Eargo, and they're virtually invisible. They're like little guardian angels for your ears, automatically enhancing hearing wherever you are. So when you find yourself here, or here, or here,